listening to the Neil Lampton Show. My name is Joey. This week I'm joined by Paul.
Right, mate.
By Neil.
Hello.
And by Imogen.
Hi, Joey.
5 games to catch you up on, so bear with us because we will try and keep this to at least, well, at most 4 hours. Moments of the last fortnight, year, or whatever it's been. Let's start off with Paul. You seem to have one ready and waiting to go.
Well, it's clearly Todd Kane's goal against Bournemouth. I mean, that's it. Podcast over.
Sorry.
The only exciting thing that happened in 5 weeks.
Todd Kane's goal of the month against Bournemouth.
He meant it. He clearly meant it. He put in about 15 crosses, realised our strikers are 1'4", decided that his only option was to shoot. He shot, he scored, we loved him.
He did. Look, he's saying he meant it, isn't he?
Because he did.
But does anyone believe him? Do you actually believe him?
Well, either that or it's one of the worst crosses he's ever put in, because the options were he scored with it or it went out because it was awful.
But I just
I think he pinned it for the back post.
I just don't think anyone has ever shot from there, have they?
Apparently he scored another goal exactly the same.
Well, I did see that, but it's just like maybe he's just saying, well, I scored that one before, so I can get away with saying I've done it again. But
He does
he
look
also
up and he's the
does he?
goalie. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like a cross in the way that he's done it, but why is anybody shooting from there? That doesn't happen, does it?
Because I think, as I said, without the tongue in cheek, he realised that we were getting nowhere near any of his crosses. Literally, we were getting nowhere near any of them. So I think he just, in the last, it was like the 93rd minute, he had, and if you look at the angle he's at quite, it's not an acute angle. He's actually sort of quite near the edge of the area. The angle to do it is quite good. And I honestly think he meant it, because I think he knew that
maybe
he wasn't going to get, no one was going to get on the end of it.
Okay, maybe he did mean it, and maybe he is great, and maybe he's got a great shot in him, but none of that gives him the right to take that free kick that he took the game afterwards. That was not on.
Oh God, no! But also that goal, that goal doesn't give him the right to start every game, because his passing is still quite poor. But it was a great goal. If you took away his crossing, he's not been great, but his crossing is okay, because he put 27 in against Huddersfield or something. Like literally, he put in more crosses than anyone since anyone ever. No one gets on the end of him, which I think says a lot.
Wasn't the first Bournemouth goal the same as Kane's, that the wind dragged it in? Are you trying to tell me that Kane not only is a master marksman, but he also judged the wind to?
The first Bournemouth's first goal is one of those crosses you talk about a lot. He's a right-footed player on the left-hand side, and he's crossed it in to either go in or be scored by an attacker coming across. It's a perfect cross, come shot, come goal, their first goal. And I've heard a lot of people go, "Oh, Moore should have dealt with it." I'm not sure what he could have done. He couldn't have come out because Solanke was there, and it just happened to sneak in at the far post. But that's how I would take every free kick I've ever seen in that position, and always swing it to the back post. I think it's sometimes you just concede a goal and it's like, yeah, he's put in the perfect ball there.
Very quickly before we leave Solanke, has anyone ever seen a Championship striker more obviously equipped to score goals in the Championship and never score in the Premier League in your entire life?
Accurate, yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Right, so Neil, moment of the last month or so.
Oh, I've missed so much of it. I've been all over the shop. I've been moving house and in other countries, and last week I was in Oxford watching the game on my phone while everybody else around me is watching the
not
Man
another
City
country.
Game. So yeah, no, I'm all over the shop.
Where have you been abroad,
good
Neil?
fun. Does it not count? You travelled, didn't you? You travelled to Oxford?
No, you said you've been in other countries.
Oh yeah, Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Political, yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah. So what's your moment then?
Well, the moment was just us scoring that goal and me losing my shit. Well, trying not to lose my shit, but also losing my shit in the middle of a pub when nothing else was going on the TV. And I'm just a bit peculiar. So people just thought I was just taking the piss. But no, I was delighted. And also, actually, I was delighted for Jody Jones getting the assist with a great cross, having been told by Mark Robbins like about a minute earlier, like, Jody, whip the fucker in, or something along those lines. That was what I lip read anyway. So
lovely. Imogen?
The Adi Viveash wrestle.
Yes.
See, this is what I thought you were going to say, Paul. I thought this was the obvious choice for the month.
No, it was Todd Kane's goal. It was clearly Todd Kane's
Apparently
goal.
not.
All these are good. These are all good. They're all good second places. It's a bit like, yeah, you can argue which is the second best Christmas song after Fairy Tale of New York. But we can have that discussion, but we all know it's Fairy Tale of New York.
Right.
We all know it was Todd Kane's goal.
I mean, these
are just like the side dishes.
The poor choice of Christmas song. But let's get back to the main course. Imogen, you tell us about the best thing that happened in the last month or so.
Yeah, you've got to give him his flowers. He took it professionally. He didn't gloat. He acted like it was just part of his role. And Robbins acknowledged it as such. It was fabulous. This behooded little scrote ran across the pitch and Viveash just took him out. It's wonderful.
I had
the only good thing about the West Brom game, I think.
Quite possibly. I hadn't clocked that Viveash until the last sort of couple of months. I hadn't clocked that he was an ex-player. And then what became apparent in the aftermath of that, should we call it a challenge, is a number of different people saying, yeah, he's not changed from how he was as a player. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen him at work. He always seems like quite a sort of cerebral figure to me, Viveash, but I suppose, you could beat the shit out of strikers in your playing career and not be a lunkhead, I suppose.
He's a renaissance man.
He is.
He'll deal with anything.
It is indeed, yeah. The only other thing for me is something that we've sort of minorly touched on in terms of rounding things off for moments of the month would be just how delighted I am at the sort of green shoots of emergence of Jody Jones back into the fold, who, whenever he's come on in these last few games, has either created the goal against Huddersfield or has just looked really energetic and really kind of, well, let's say not out of his depth. The worry was always going to be with Jones is that he would get his fitness back, but then it would transpire that he was a really, really brilliant League Two player and an abysmal Championship player. But on early evidence, it would appear that's not the case. And I would suggest that it's at a time where we've never needed another alternative number 10 more.
I think you've got to be very careful playing 5-minute cameos in games where basically he's come on to try and the main two times he's come on, the games where we're just chasing, we've got nothing to lose. Huddersfield sat very back, Bournemouth was sat very back. I think, it's, again, a bit like the Todd Kane thing earlier, some of his cameos at the start since he joined. Oh, he comes on, he does this and this. Yeah, because we're chasing the game. When he starts, I'm sort of yet to be overly impressed with Todd Kane, and I'm a bit reticent to be anything other than, yeah, when Jody Jones comes on, he looks busy, but ultimately he's playing in he's got nothing to lose, and I think you can be very careful that in 5-10 minutes you're building something up for something which is still a long way off.
I'm not.
But we're building him up, aren't we?
Yeah,
That's the main thing. But we're using him.
I'm just saying. I'm glad that he seems to be able to come on and have an impact on the game. I'm not saying that he's the second coming of Christ. I just think that. It's
the
good.
Context.
It's good to see him on the pitch, and it's nice to see him moving in the right direction. I think, in all likelihood, he's not our long-term number 10 solution, but it's nice to be able to see him progress in his career at the very least. Oh, and also, what I'd like to take his task on, are you going to take everything back to Todd Kane tonight? Is that what you're going to do? You're going to be like, oh yeah, you know.
I just don't. I think these sort of. I think the worry is that people will get overexcited and sort of. Will he start against Stoke? Will he come straight into the team? Is he a number 10 viable option? Ultimately, he's an impact sub. He's only still played about 50 minutes this season.
I think you're underexcited, which is a long-term problem for you, may I add.
I'm neither excited or underexcited. I'm just appreciating the fact that the worry was always going to be that people get overexcited about him, and I think it was a great cross.
God forbid people enjoy themselves.
No, yeah. Why would you do that? I mean, that's not what I'm here for. Dear God,
Paul. Right.
My concern would be that sort of people get a bit too overexcited about and. Sort of like, oh, he's proven he's a championship player. No, he's proven he can do cameo appearances when we're chasing the game. And I think we need to be sort of a bit reserved on him.
I thought I was, but there you go.
He told you, didn't he, Joey?
Let's
You were doing the good thing. You were fighting the fight. Oh dear, Paul.
Let's take this down to the trenches where Paul wants to be. Let's talk about the first game in this run that we haven't talked about so far, which was Sheffield United away. Paul, how did Todd Kane play in this game?
I'm not even sure if he started in that game.
I've just checked. He did.
Is this one of the games where we decided we weren't going to play with anyone who was left-footed?
Yeah, Dabo started on the left.
Yeah. Sheffield United. Yeah, it was a thrilling game of which apparently we dominated the first half, unless you looked at the stats, which basically said Sheffield United had more possession and more shots. And then we had should we have got a penalty? Should Callum O'Hare just hit the bloody thing? Probably yes. Definitely yes. And then we hung on because we took off Gyökeres, Chief and Hamer, I believe, and it drew 0-0, and it was probably a fair result.
Good. I thought you said specifically that you wanted to talk about that game.
That's what I wanted to say. I told you it would take me minutes, if that. And you were like, no. And Neil didn't believe me. That's literally all that happened in that game. Was they had that we should have had maybe a penalty, or Callum O'Hare should have scored, or at least should have shot, and Sheffield United were pretty poor. We sort of dominated, but without dominating.
Can we not talk about Simon Moore a little bit in that game?
You can do.
Well, he was just very good, wasn't he? Although I think for the second half specifically, my memory of it, hazy as it is now, with it being however long ago it was, is that I think we did have the kind of, and this is going to be a running theme throughout these games, we were very much the sultans of sterile possession, to sort of steal a phrase from Neil Lamptey Show 2012 or whatever that would have been. But the Sheffield United had 3 really good chances at the end, didn't they? That were basically Simon Moore saves away from them taking the game away from us.
I was on row 4, so I couldn't really see much at the other end of the pitch.
I'm conscious that I've seen a few people start to turn their nose up a little bit at Simon Moore, and I haven't been to many of these games, which I'm glad to say that I've got a few coming up that I'm going to be going to, but until they're cancelled because we can't go to games because of COVID. But to me, I don't see where any criticism's coming from. I think he's been, the safe pair of unspectacular hands that we've been crying out for the last 12 months or so. Has anyone's opinion of him changed?
People have been saying he's better than Kieran Westwood after he played 10 games. The problem is people jump to these massive conclusions. He's okay. He's a good goalkeeper. He's the best goalkeeper we've probably had in a while because he's a championship goalkeeper, and for 10 years we weren't in the championship, so we had lower league goalkeepers. He's just a championship goalkeeper. He's fine.
I get greedy occasionally, but it's just fleeting. Like sometimes, why isn't he saved that? He should be saving that if we have, when we let in a couple of goals. But that's just the occasional anger. When you look at it as a season as a whole, what else would you want? A keeper who's just doing the bizzo, keeping everybody in check, giving the ball to Carl Hudson so he can stride out. I mean, it's all setting up perfectly, I think.
And he was another one that's probably worth mentioning, that will be another running theme through these games. He had a very good game that day. I gather from Robbins that he's a Sheffield United fan, isn't he, and that he was doing everything he could to stand out. But he has been, I've seen Dom talking about McFadzean as being our best performer for the season so far. And I usually have the highest level of criticism for McFadzean. I'd have to agree with him, to be fair. I think he's been really, really good, but he really stood out in that game again as well. Right, okay, so Birmingham. I mean, for a game that you would normally expect to come off a game as bad as Sheffield United and say, right, moving on to something with a bit more life in it. Birmingham didn't really have anything at all to talk about.
That's really unfair. For 45 minutes, we absolutely dominated them without
testing their keeper once.
Yeah. And I think you talk about patterns, and there are certain patterns which, there are over the 5 games, very much so. One of them is, I think, Michael Rose's return to form. I think he's looked very good. Another thing is the fact we don't look like a team who are going to... we get into brilliant... or a nihilism from how many years ago. We get to positions where we have the chance to create chances, And we get into so many brilliant positions where if we had a bit more quality, we would have torn Birmingham apart, like absolutely tore them. And we got to the final third and it all went to bits. And if you look, talking about Adi earlier, I think this team is as well organised as I can remember from any Cov team. They're just the back five, the back seven, the whole system that we play defensively and the way that people play it. We are so well drilled. And I think it's something that doesn't really get talked about enough. And that's why we're seventh. And that's why we're in the top six. And that's almost why we got promoted from the from League One, is we are a very, very well organised side with consistent performance at the back. The thing that separates you from the very top of this division is having that quality in the final third. And that's the Birmingham game illustrated, amongst some of the others in this particular quintet of games, is the lack sometimes of quality in the final third. And that first half against Birmingham, where like Hamer was playing some outrageous passes.
He was lovely.
Tearing Birmingham apart. Very good. And yet their keeper didn't make a save.
What I found interesting in that game, and this is a kind of a like a blame conundrum, is I couldn't tell in the end. I don't know at what point you blame wide players for putting in bad crosses, or you blame players in the box for not putting themselves in a position to cross to. And consistently it felt like there was space at the near post to be attacked, and that Birmingham had got reasonable size centre halves. Who's the real annoyance that they've got at the back? In fact, they've got two, haven't they? Their centre backs could have dealt with anything in the air all night, and they're like Championship Atletico Madrid, aren't they? Just really mean and nasty and gamesmanshipy. And that consistently it felt like it needed like Adam Armstrong pointing at the near post and darting towards it to try and knock one in past the keeper like that. But we just never had the presence of mind to change up what we were trying to do. And like I say, we kept chucking balls in that never really came to anything. And you kind of think, well, how do you fix that? What is that? Does that make sense? I know that's a very, very, very open question, but does anyone want to try and...
But it's mad, isn't it? Because there's like these fleeting moments where we look so sure of ourselves, and even earlier in the season when we were scoring, I always look at that Fulham game, and I know it's a one-off, but you just see how sort of free and direct and dynamic and purposeful we were in that game, and you sort of think, well, it's the same players, it's all the same players. They've got all the same attributes, and yet, is it decisions? Is it just a hesitancy? What is it that causes them to not be those players anymore? I mean, O'Hare is the perfect example of a player who, when he first came to the club, and he got a few assists and then got a few goals, and he would find the right pass a lot of the time, and he would get the ball in the box, and he would test the keeper. And now it's just everything but that. It's such a cliche, but everything but that last ball is usually a decent decision. He's moving on. He takes the ball with him, and then he just gets into that area, and it's just whether it's a touch too far, or what gets me about him is his commitment to whatever he's decided to do. He will just do it, even if it's no longer on. He will not change his mind. It's like the ball, and you have to be able to adapt and adjust. And I think it's a lot of that, really. It's just not making the right calls, or just committing to the cross and doing the Da Costa and crossing for the sake of crossing, rather than recognising, okay, let's start again. Let's try something different.
I think he's been a big problem for us going forward in terms of the output. There's all of the usual O'Hare caveats that he's doing lots and lots and lots of really worthwhile, excellent things. The other thing for me is that I think we've missed Gyökeres, and not in the sense that we've missed his goals, which is the obvious thing given the drop-off in goals, but that Godden has compensated for Gyökeres' goals. The thing is about the way that we were attacking when he was in peak form was that we were able to give him the ball with nothing on, and he would be able to carry it either wide or centrally, and it gave us an unpredictability, and also gave us a kind of more of a... We weren't so reliant on crosses into the box. Usually he would be flanked by two players, and we would have options of either through balls or that we could give it off to someone wide who would then have two players in the box at least to cross to. And his kind of disappearance from the game overall, I think, has really hampered us, because instead we've sort of relied on just chucking it out wide and whacking it into the box, which I don't think a lot of our goals have come from this season when we were hot. But we seem to have reverted to that as a type, generally speaking.
We're missing Waghorn.
This is the other thing is, as mad as it sounds to say, considering I wasn't terribly complimentary about him at the start of the season, but I do think absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I think his movement and his intelligence is missed. But go on, Paul, you elaborate on that more.
I think the thing is sort of, you can't take away Godden's goals, because Godden's goals have been fantastic. But you can take away from the fact that you can spend minutes, 15, 20 minutes at a time, where Godden isn't influencing the game. He's not involved at all. And it's an issue. Against Bournemouth, he wasn't involved. And he's not a lone striker, but he wasn't involved for 70, 75 minutes. And the thing is, both him and Gyökeres want to make the same runs. So they do make the same runs. It's just Gyökeres is better when the ball goes to him. So Godden gets more maligned because we use Gyökeres more. But when Gyökeres isn't there, you've only got Godden up front on his own. Godden's not involved. So you're basically playing with a man down. But at the moment, Godden's scoring the goals. So to some extent, you can't see him being taken out. The thing is with Waghorn, he was looking to get into different areas. He was looking to pop up and get the ball in different zones, which helped Gyökeres and probably would help Godden as well. So, and also, I know everyone's. I don't think I've seen O'Hare have a good game for a while now. And even someone who accused me of not watching games and all the usual things you get on Twitter, even he accepted he hasn't played well since Bristol City. So we've got a number 10 who is a great defensive number 10. We don't lose many games with him in the team. But at the moment, if we had a more offensive number 10, a number 10 who created goals and scored goals, our 2 wins in 11 would be far healthier, because it is that lack of quality. And it was very evident on Saturday.
But are we the same team? And we're back here again, aren't we?
Well, the thing is, we don't know, do we? I mean, that's almost... Are we not losing games because of Callum O'Hare? I think we're not losing games because defensively we're really good. Would we be as defensively really good without Callum O'Hare? We don't know, because the sample size is so small because he plays every game. If we had a number of 10 who could score goals, and we scored, and he got 5 goals in the last, or even 2 goals in the last 10 games, we might be more victories. And that's the conundrum, isn't it? It's like, no one doubts the great things that O'Hare does, but he doesn't score. And at the moment, he's not creating. So you're playing with an extra defensive player, because that's what his role is at the moment. It's very defensive. It's not offensive. And so that's hindering the team. His final ball and lack of goals is hindering the team. To how much? I don't know. No one knows. But in the last couple of games where Mark Robins has needed a goal, he's taken O'Hare off, which I think is a big statement of, he's my number 10. I desperately need a goal. I'm going to take off my number 10.
Yeah.
And he's put Matty Godden as number 10. He's tried
Tyler Walker
as number 10. Like, he's tried everything other than O'Hare as a number 10 late in games. He's taken off his number 10.
He's also
He's
also not been terribly keen on taking O'Hare off in the past, has he?
No, and I think he's beginning to. But the clear thing is, we don't have a number 10. That is the clear thing that we knew in the summer when we signed Bright, because we knew that all last season. And ultimately, we're still talking about the fact that O'Hare's still only got 2 goals in the last calendar year, and he's our number 10.
You're still talking about that.
Okay, I'm still talking about it. But if that was any other player, any other number 10 we've ever had in our history, it would be being discussed. He's got fewer goals this season than Carl McFadden by 3-1. And for all of his good work, no one's denying he does some brilliant work. His final ball in the last couple of months has been crap. His shooting is crap.
I want to take this forward. Imogen, what would you, given everything we've talked about, so Gyökeres, Godden, Walker, O'Hare, what would you do over the next few run of games in terms of what does our sort of attacking 3 or 4 look like?
I think what Neil was saying about a reticence to shoot or for that final ball to be as clinical as it should be is absolutely right. I don't know whether I'm as keen on bringing Waghorn back. I think we do miss Gyökeres having that. Even if he's not on the ball, he's drawing at least 2 defenders away from Godden, giving him a lot more space. And I think we've really missed that. I think Godden was really easily stifled, certainly against Huddersfield and maybe more in the previous games as well. But we're just so limited, aren't we, going forward? You're right, there's no one that we can put in place of O'Hare. Walker hasn't been given a great amount of minutes, but then when he has come on, he's just not. It's not that he's not scoring, which he's obviously not. It's more that he's not in the game at all. He just doesn't. There are 2 or 3 games where he came on and I couldn't name a single thing that he did. Now, maybe that is just because he's coming on too late, but then you've got the Jody Jones argument. You know, he came on late against Bournemouth and against Huddersfield. And I take Paul's point about, you know, we're chasing the game, but he created 2 goals. So, Robbins has got to find something anyway if we've got any money at all, because we're so limited on options. Even if you bring Waghorn in, I still don't think that's enough for us to sustain our current position.
So commit to something, Imogen. Who would you make as your front 3 for the next game? Assuming that you keep the same formation and you choose to either play 2 up front or 2 behind, who are you choosing?
Well, we played Gyökeres. I played Gyökeres and Godden
with O'Hare
in
behind.
place of. Go on, what were you going to say?
With O'Hare behind.
Yeah. You have to play O'Hare. There's no one else. Who else are you going to put in there?
Well, Jamie Allen's a very functional number 10, as far as I can see.
No.
I agree,
Yes,
Imogen. I'm with you. I think there's I feel mad when I think about how I think about Cov, and the way I think about us is, you know, those moments where we are as fluid as we have been for huge proportions of the season, and that to me is O'Hare still being in that team. And the reason why I say, are we the same team? Are we us without him? Is just because, you know, you could look for somebody else who might. You could put Jordan Shipley in there; he'll get more goals. But does that make us the team that's sustainably going to be able to stick it up? And right now, I think we're in a patch. But I think as a sustainable unit, there are certain things which I would, and this is just personal opinion, I would stick with, because I think over the long run they're going to make us the more formidable team, and that's making tough decisions. So that's for me saying, I don't care how many good crosses Todd Kane puts in, but I keep Darboe on the right hand side and Maatsen on the left, because that gives us the shape and the fluidity and the balance that I think makes us as strong as we can be. And you know, and it means putting O'Hare in number 10 position, because even though he's a lunatic and he doesn't make the right pass all half the time, and it winds me up, for 80% of all the rest of our game, he's integral to the speed and the directness of it all. And the one which I don't have any clarity on is those strikers up front, because we've only, and this is what you said earlier, Paul, but it's that sample size is so small of the Gyökeres Waghorn partnership. In my mind, I'm like, I'll just stick with everything that I was working with earlier in the season, because, you know, that's what you do. But that was just part of that was Gyökeres being just so good. And whether it's a massive coincidence that he just happened to play 10 defenders who was miles better, and now he suddenly played a load who are better than him, I don't know. But that part, it's the strikers more than anything else. The rest of the team has got a shape and a fluidity about it, which I'm happy to stick with. And it's just that connection up front, which I missed. I think I missed Gyökeres, early season Gyökeres, more than I miss anybody else in the team.
By the way,
and the problem with
sorry, a couple of things.
Sorry.
Go on. Go on.
Imogen, you go.
I was just going to talk about the changing the formation, because we changed it. Robbins changed it at Huddersfield, and for the next 5-10 minutes, they didn't look like they had a clue what was going on. And that happens in games, and presumably if they're starting and changing it on a regular basis, then they'll get more used to what Robbins wants from them. And I keep thinking back to Robbins, was it the Fleetwood game in League One where he changed the formation and the whole season turned on its head, and we played so much more with so much more composure, and it really helped propel us up the league. But I think what Neil's saying is right, that if you've got that composure and the shape there, I don't know, I feel quite reluctant to mess with it.
I get scared basically because of the olden days with, we had something that worked really, really well for us with Tony Mowbray, and he, in my eyes, bottled that really dynamic young team, brought in Henderson, Hunt, just because of what I saw was another patch. Same goes for back when Roland and Nielsen, back in the day when we were pretty much flying in Division 1. We looked like a decent team. Bottled it again, bringing in Paul Trollope, Carbonari, changing the dynamics. And it's just like, what has got you to this point? And, if we can all agree at least that's 7th in this league and playing pretty decent football for almost half the season is a good point. I get, and you've got to make changes and you've got to adjust, but I just worry that we get scared and we change something that makes us and makes us who we are, and then we just don't find it again.
At this point, I wanted to very quickly jump in and say something. We sound like we're being critical, I think. Whereas I think what we're doing is we're trying to say, here's how we turn. So we've recently dropped from 3rd to 7th. And I think what we want is for all of us to try and jump back into that area. But I think it also should be like worth saying out loud before someone accuses us of being disrespectful, that this is an absolutely bonkers season, the likes of which we couldn't have expected at the start of it. And also the fact that if this is a sticky patch for us, to use the word that you used there before, Neil, is we have not lost, I think we've lost 1 out of the last 5. Now I know they've all been draws, but last season we'd have lost 3 of those games. We wouldn't have picked those points up, and we are still in 7th. I think all of us can probably, without wanting to put words in people's mouths, and obviously disagree if you want to, but this season has been absolutely fantastic. We just want the best for it, as with always, I suppose, don't we?
And
we just see more there, don't we? Sorry, Paul, you go.
That's the thing, isn't it? But ultimately, we've only won 2 of the last 11, and we've only lost 3 of the last 11. Because, as I said earlier, I think defensively we're pretty good, and we don't lose because defensively we are really good, and we're well drilled. And Hyam's had a bit of a tricky patch. He's come through it. I think Rose has been really good, as everyone's raving about McFadzean. Moore is a solid goalkeeper. It doesn't really matter who plays at wing backs. They've all sort of shone at different stages. We are defensively a very well organised team, and we've been this for 3-4 seasons. We are a team of fine margins. We don't concede many, apart from obviously the Luton aberration. Like defensively, we're mid-table. Offensively, we're mid-table in terms of where we are stacking up against the other teams. The worry is we are now 2 wins in 11, and yes, we've played some difficult teams in that time, but you
will do always, won't you? It's 11 games.
Always, you've played the quarter of the season now. Of course, you're going to play difficult teams. The thing is, in that time, we've had opportunities. Sheffield United, Birmingham, are clear examples of opportunities. Yeah. Huddersfield, again, a fine example of an opportunity. If we'd have won all 3 of those, which isn't beyond the realms of possibility, we'd be 3rd. And that's where it comes back to me, is you look at that team and it's like, where's the obvious weakness? And for me, the obvious weakness is in the attacking third. So if we could bring someone in January, an attacking player, I think we should do it, because I think ultimately that's what's stopping us being in the playoffs, is that attacking player. Now, whether or not that's a replacement for O'Hare or someone to supplement O'Hare, I don't know. But I do know that if O'Hare was the player that some of our fans think he is, then we would be in the top 6. And that might sound really harsh, but I'm going to go with it. I like O'Hare as much as everyone else likes O'Hare, but that final third touch is a reason that we've not won at least one of the last 4 games where we've dominated patches, because it breaks down in the final third with a bad ball, and that's frustrating. In terms of Tyler Walker, I feel a bit sorry for him, because I think basically I don't think all players are great when they come on as subs. And I think since he's been with us, he's scored twice as a sub, one in a League Cup tie at the start of last year and one in the Millwall thrashing. Not all players are great subs. That might make me sound like I'm defending him. I'm not. When I see him, I don't see a player who's coming on who's
very quickly. He's got a better minutes per goal ratio than Gyökeres has.
Well, the thing is, but yes, but you can when you don't play that many games and you score 2 in 2. And as we all said, Gyökeres provides a lot more, but Walker doesn't come on and look like a sub who's going to score you goals, does he? He looks, and it's a bit of his issue, he looks a bit disinterested. But I find, against Sheffield United, a guy next to me slagging him off as soon as he came on. And it was like, well, you've given him no time to get into the game and you've already decided that he's not running hard enough for you. And it's like, but he's a finisher.
He's not a running hard player, is he? I don't want him to be running hard. I want him to be in the box, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's like not every player is the same, so you can't ask Tyler Walker to do the running that Callum O'Hare does. So why are you asking him to do it? Like, surely there's more nuance to football than that. But I think that in January, if they've got any cash, I think they've got to go out and strengthen the attacking third, because I don't see the reason to go out anywhere else unless they buy in a left wing back who we trust slightly more than Maatsen.
Because Maatsen's going to Barcelona, isn't he? So
I've just read that today. Yeah.
But on the Waghorn thing, Waghorn started 7 games for us this season. We won 5 of them, and I think obviously his last game was Luton, which obviously we got hammered. He missed the first game I thought was Fulham, but that was the last time Gyökeres scored. I think Gyökeres is desperately missing Waghorn because of what Waghorn brings. And if Waghorn, I don't know what's wrong with Waghorn, but again,
it's his shoulder, isn't it? I believe.
Is it shoulder?
I think so.
And you'd like to think, but as you say, we are in a magnificent position. We're clearly in a magnificent position. We're just outside the playoffs. The problem is like there's 10 teams beneath us who are all thinking we're in a magnificent position, because all the way down to like 18th are only 6 points outside the playoffs. So January's going to be huge because there'll be teams. Forest are on form. Swansea are a big club. So I said Notts Forest. There's Middlesbrough. There's a lot of teams just beneath us who will go out and strengthen. They're not going to rest on their laurels, and I don't think we should.
I also wanted to chip in and say that I think everything you've said about Callum O'Hare is completely fair, but I also think it's an oversimplification of things. I also think that it's a big problem that we are in Christmas, basically, and that we have got 2 in total goals from central midfield. And that's not from, our 2 starting central midfielders. That's 1 goal from Jamie Allen and 1 goal from Gus Harmer. I think that O'Hare does need a better output level, but I think that we are a team entirely reliant on either Gyökeres or Godden, depending on which 2 months of the year have passed so far. And there are really not goals coming from anywhere else. I think that is just as much of a problem as O'Hare's general lack of output. There's generally a lack of output. I think the whole team needs to step up a little bit more. But
it's not, isn't it? Because we're good. This is we're all coming at it from the same place where we're all looking. It's not we've just got to 7th and it's amazing. We've slipped from a position where we were comfortably top 6. We were good. Every team we play, we look broadly as good or superior to, and it's just like this leap to where we are right now. I love it. I love being in this position where we're seeking out reasons and how we're gonna jump up rather than clinging on to something, or like last year where it just didn't really. It looked like we were going to drop, and it's a good step up this year. It really is.
We're also not in a position that we were when we went down from the Championship, where you feel like if we lost whoever the equivalent Jukovic would be, that we would drop like a stone. Like when Jukovic left that January, we knew that we were going down. But there's talk of Harmer going in January, or whoever else. But I don't think you could take a player out of this team and see us drop like a stone more than we are at the moment. Anyway, but do you know what I mean? I think it's a team on the grow. I think we've, like you say, we've got an established, settled team. I think it's now a case of sort of adding to it. Let's rattle through the last of the games. I think, because I think we've probably done enough. Well, just talking basically in general. Bournemouth, we were. I mean, does anyone want to add anything to? We were really quite bad against the team that you. The only thing I would say,
we weren't bad.
What would have been nice is if you'd let me finish.
Sorry.
Is if we.
We weren't bad.
But I thought we were bad against a team who made us look bad. So I thought the same as. Do you remember Harmer getting sent off in the season before against them?
Yep.
And I just thought he'd played fabulously up to that point, and then he came up against Jefferson Lerma in that game, and I was like, you're a really good player, but you're not as good as Jefferson Lerma is. And that's what I felt looking at us against Bournemouth. I just thought we've stepped up too fast, too quick, and we're just playing a team that are much better. When I say that we look bad, I just thought that they looked they're just so better than us in every sense. Every position had got a player that outclassed ours. And whilst I thought that we were below par, I thought it was just because Bournemouth were so good until they completely imploded. Now, do you want to take
and also I thought in that first 70 minutes, I thought this is why we can't go up, because this is what every game is going to be like. And I would be sad for the entire season. Yeah. They were so much better than us. I agree. And then they just stopped playing. It was weird.
So I think that's two different things. I think they were clearly better than us. I just don't think we were bad, because bad was Preston. Our limitations were showing up, and I think so. I know this is a nuanced thing, but I think that's completely different. I don't think against Preston we made shitloads of stupid mistakes, and we looked like a bad team. Against Bournemouth, we played within the limitations of what we were allowed to do. Okay, it was just Bournemouth were better than us, and sometimes you are against teams that are better than you, but I don't think that makes you particularly bad. It just makes you not as good.
You're listening to the Semantics podcast.
No, I know. I accept the fact it is semantics, but the thing is, I went to Preston and I was pissed off because we were shit and we were bad, and you were there with me, and we were bad that day. We weren't bad against Bournemouth.
We were bad in the second half. We were bad in the last 40 minutes.
Even the first half, we were sloppy against Preston.
No, we looked good. We looked absolutely fine. We just, again, similar to what the problem is at the minute, is we didn't really fashion a killer chance.
But even against Preston, one of the first times where both of us were really disappointed with how Dominic Hyan played for the entire 90 minutes because his passing was sloppy. I don't think anyone was like that against Bournemouth. We just, like, Jamie Allen just wasn't involved. Godden wasn't involved because Bournemouth had so much possession. But yeah, their implosion was bizarre, utterly bizarre. I've never seen a team throw away such a dominant position so needlessly. The fact they sat back and just allowed us to attack. And I think not long after the player was sent off, Dominic Solanke was sort of sat at left back position. And it was just, you don't need to be there. If you carried on playing as you were, you would have walked this game because you've got the quality. But, I think if you look at the top two, they've got one win in the last 10 games between them. And that's, again, the frustration is the fact that, we've only won twice in 11, but we haven't slid to 14th. We're actually as close to the top two as we've been all season. It's that little bit extra, isn't it? But Bournemouth is one of those games where you were like, yeah, you are really good. But also, if you want to give us any credit for the 70 minutes, they didn't have that many decent chances. We defended really well, really resolute. We were actually, and this is again going back to what we were saying earlier, we were never out of that game. Previously, we would have been 4-0 down. We would have been out of that game before the sending off. But we were never completely out of it as much as we were outplayed. And that's why I refuse to say they were bad, because a bad team would have been 4 or 5-0 down. and we weren't. We were still in it to have that player sent off and still be within touching distance of coming back to draw.
Before we move on to the next game, is Paul, you went to Bournemouth, didn't you? Which is no mean feat from Manchester. So how did you get there?
I originally planned to go. Well, first off, I was very fortunate to get a ticket because, as we all know, tickets for Bournemouth were like tickets to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. So I opened my chocolate bar and got my golden ticket, and I was going to go on train because there's a train straight from Manchester to Bournemouth, and that was 160 quid. So I did what any sane person would do and touted for journeys on the internet. And luckily, Mark Rogers, who lives just outside Bolton, dropped me a message and said, "We're going, fancy a lift?" So he picked me up at 7 o'clock. He drove down. We drove through the snow in Birmingham, got down there. It was a very pleasant journey. My wife was like, "What are you going to talk about for 8 hours?" "What do you think we're going to talk about for 8 hours?" We talked about Con for most of the 8 hours.
I had thought you'd gone down on the train on your own, which was an unbelievably more palatable situation. Now I think I've met Mark Rogers in Tib Street Tavern at some
Yes,
point.
he said that he met him. He met you once, and you went, "Do you listen to the show?" And he went, "No," and you told him to fuck off.
I don't think there was. I don't think that would have happened.
Having met you, I could almost categorically say that probably did happen.
I don't think that would have happened. Yeah, the name rings a bell. I think I know the guy. He's a nice guy. But even still, meeting a stranger and then being in a car with them for what? In total, how long were you in the car for them?
Well, we left about 20 past 7 and got back about half 10.
No. No. Pay the 160 quid. Take out a payday loan or something.
It was, I went down with his son, Nat, as well. It was a thoroughly pleasant journey. He's a lovely guy. It helped. I think we were all a bit disconsolate after about 70 minutes with the journey down there, but obviously and it was very cold. God, I haven't been that cold at a football ground in a long time.
Oh my God, it was the coldest I've ever been.
Baltic down, yeah, it really was. Yes, it was. But no, it's so my longest train record is still Torquay away in the FA Cup. That will probably never be beaten, to be honest.
Wow. Okay. Imogen, Neil, would you shack up with the stranger for the sake of the money?
No,
I guess it's different for you two because you two were the other half, aren't you, I suppose?
What do you think you're saying to me?
I'm intrigued what he means by this as well.
Well, Imogen, you live in metropolitan London.
Agreed.
Neil, you've just taken the the astonishing leap from Warwick to Leamington.
More travel, yeah.
More travel. Yeah, I guess £160 train journey is nothing to people like you, is it?
That's what we do.
I have to travel with Laurie sometimes, so
yes.
I carry my own burden.
Yeah, you've got the worst of both worlds, is that you're having to pay the expensive trains and also having to travel with someone that you don't want to talk to.
Yeah, it's a miracle I get through the week, really.
It is indeed. Right, okay, let's wrap up the final two games. West Brom at home.
They play better than us, they beat us.
Well, yeah. This is the thing, is I don't know whether there is a great deal more. I mean, the thing is that they should beat us, shouldn't they?
The thing, I was saying about the Bournemouth game, sometimes you play against teams who are just slightly better than you. Against West Brom, it was just a little bit more frustrating because it always is at home, but also to some extent the West Brom game you could probably say that the players probably didn't do themselves as much justice.
I would go down that more than the route that they were like obscenely better than us. They were a good team and they were a strong team, but I think we weren't us that day.
No, I agree with Neil on that one. I think the second goal was just a highlight of it, of a team that was a little bit fogged of mind. Like we know that guy's got a long throw in, but you still don't leave one player out there. It's just, and I know it was it handball, wasn't it? And I know there's been probably in each of the games we've discussed against Birmingham there should have been a penalty on Gyökeres. I said in the Sheffield United game there's potentially the penalty on Callum O'Hare. Bournemouth, I don't really remember there being a contentious decision in that one because the sending off was definitely a sending off. But yeah, against did he punch it into the net? But ultimately, don't be that naive that you give a player that much time to get a cross in.
by the way, I'm very proud of us, the fact that there's been, when you look through these games, there's been a load of referee decision chat that we could have had. And I'm very, very pleased that we haven't had it, because I think it's the most tedious bit of football analysis, is whether a decision should have gone way or another. That's what happens in football. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. Like, it doesn't... That's not the thing that affects the game over the course of 90 minutes. Like, you can still make a difference. Like, do you know what I mean? Is that if that happens,
it can wind you up, yeah.
Then it happens, yeah, of course, and it can decide the outcome of a game. But I would still rather talk about whether we lost that game because we'd set up wrong or not. Do you know what I mean?
Especially when there's nothing specific, like that Frank Lampard thing against Germany still winds me up to this day, because it was just
it's so
totally
obvious
wrong
for a start. Yeah, it's just an awful thing to happen. Yeah,
you get I just don't get if people are just being dramatic, but when they say he was clearly biased, he was clearly like, no, but they don't hate Cov. Referees don't hate Cov. It's not a thing.
But it took about 80 replays.
No.
It took about 80 replays on the West Brom one. In the end, I think it was decided that it was McFadzean that had the final touch of the ball. Like, I don't think it was a handball on there. But we're talking now about such unbelievably marginal decisions that you just think, who gives a shit? That's not... There's bits... Like you say, the Lampard goal is a really good example of it. But because that's so, like, injustice-y. But that when you're having to watch something back 50 times, you think it hasn't lost you the game. Like, that's just a thing that happens.
Yeah. Let's be honest. The thing that lost us the game was starting Dabo at centre half and having Hyam on the bench.
Oh my
Why do we keep doing this?
God, yeah.
And then Hyam comes on, and friend of the show Andrew Russell pointed this out. The defensive header he put in the second half, where Hyam basically headed it from underneath his own crossbar. It was like, that's what a first choice centre half gives you. He gives you that clearance. Dabo doesn't make that clearance because he's not covering it, because Dabo is a right wing back, and it's two different jobs. It's completely different. Don't make someone do a job they're not used to. And Hyam, as I said, I think he had a bit of a ropey spell. The last couple of games, he's been magnificent again, because he's a right-sided centre half and championship level at that. Dabo's just right wing back.
On that, before we move on to the Huddersfield game, can we very quickly talk about the fact that at no point did Dabo raise a hand to say, apologies, that's on me, that one?
I wasn't overly impressed when Maatsen got sent off against Bristol City and no one walked over to him and put their arm around him and was like, shit happens. I was a bit frustrated by that. In the same way that, Dabo didn't sort of admit it was his.
I feel like if you've made that mistake, I feel like the least you can do is go, I'm really sorry, guys, that one's on me. Whereas he had the same lackadaisical attitude towards the apology as he did towards tracking his man. It was almost like he was like, well,
I think he still doesn't realise.
Nothing I could do about that.
It's like, well, it's not my position. Yeah. Oh, is it? Am I supposed to do that job? I swear, he just didn't realise he was supposed to be marking him.
Look how quick he ran.
Yeah. I mean, surely that was too quick.
He's facing that way anyway. I'd have had to have turned around. Think of how long that would have taken before I even started running. He's just gone. It's just one of them things. I kept watching the replays thinking, am I going to see him hold a hand? I need him to hold a hand up at some point just to sort of to cosmically realign things. Imogen, talk to us about Huddersfield, and then I think we're pretty much done, haven't we?
We had 65% possession, 22 shots, and could only manage one goal. We were dominant for most of the game. Like I said earlier, the substitution in the second half shook us up a bit, but otherwise we looked pretty composed, kept the ball really well. But I don't know. I mean, so the friend that I went with, Rob, had been on baby duty for most of this season, so hadn't seen that many games, and he was visibly shaking with joy after the final whistle. Whereas I, more jaded to these last-minute equalisers, felt a bit frustrated that only Jody Jones was running back to the centre circle after we'd scored. Everyone else was lapping up the adulation. And I thought we could easily take these. And we had so many chances. Hyam had 2 headers. Rose had 1. The magnificent man mountain that is Carl McFadzean was stupendous. I mean, it was amazing that they managed to get past our defence, to be honest. It was just, if we'd scored, I don't know, 3 minutes earlier, I think we'd have got a second. It was just so frustrating that they left it to the very end again. And I thought, Bournemouth was such a plus. That was great to come from 2 goals down, having, as Paul said, being the second best team and not really looking like we were going to get anything from the game. Huddersfield felt very different. It felt like we'd missed an opportunity. So I hope they put it right. What we got next? Stoke?
Not that I want to wax lyrical, but Huddersfield's goal was really good.
Yeah, it was. And they had a few
goal.
similar moves in the build-up to it, didn't they? Going down the same side and putting it back.
Yeah, I mean, you when you watch the goal, it was like that. Yeah, they played it around the back. They dragged us over to one side, and then unleashed 3 on the left, and then the ball in. It was just like that. It's one of those things because obviously watching at home, and you watch and on Twitter, it's like it's like just fuck it. That's a good goal. Just accept a team scored a good goal against us. Why do football fans have to look for one of their players to blame every time they can see the goal? Yeah, most goals are down to human error. Some goals are just really good goals.
You just can see the goal, don't you? Yeah.
It's like if we'd have scored that goal, that would have been my moment of the month because it was just a really well worked, great finish goal. And then it's like former Cov player, and you're like, was he?
Yeah. What's he doing celebrating? For God's sake!
Come on. And they missed that absolute sitter, didn't they, as well, at the end, quite early on in the second half. That would have been an absolute gutter because they really didn't deserve it, did they?
I wanted to ask whether there's anything that we haven't talked about before we wrap things up. The one thing that immediately springs to mind is I don't think we've said the name of Ben Sheaf out loud during this.
I was about to say that I don't understand why he keeps getting either dropped or substituted because every time I see him, I think we're a better team when Ben Sheaf's on the pitch. And when he was taken on against Sheffield United, that was one of the ones where it's like, why? What? Ben Sheaf, good player.
But
really
I think
proving us wrong.
But I think it's the O'Hare thing, isn't it? Is that the problem is that he doesn't provide any goal threat, which is absolutely fine because I think some players just don't. But the problem is that I'm not sure you can accommodate if him, Hammer, and O'Hare between them have scored 3 goals in total this season, and I guess you've got to.
But he's a defensive midfielder. If Ben Sheaf doesn't score for us in his entire Cov career, I couldn't care less.
That's fine.
In the same way, Makaleli didn't score loads for.
Yeah, 100%. But what I'm saying is if you've got 3 players on the pitch who don't score goals, you've probably got to take a couple of them off, haven't you, if you're chasing the game? So, but I agree with you. I don't need him to score a lot of goals, but I do think it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he could score 3 or 4 in a season. I think Carrick would have scored maybe 2 or 3 in a season. I could just think that some players can always do a little bit more. But I agree with you, it's not his place. I'm not criticising him. I'm just saying I can understand why he might get taken off in the heat of the moment when you're trying to pursue kind of, a last-minute winner or equaliser. But that likewise, more importantly, I think he's been great recently. I just think he's been really, really good. I think a little bit like McFadzean, but less so. I think the big Stark thing is that he's cutting down on the number of I'll just pass this across the face of my own goal without looking up passes. They're still there.
He'll get there eventually.
But the problem is that is more noticeable than 99 other completed passes that are short throughout the game. And he's been very good, hasn't he?
It's one of those truisms, isn't it? A defender makes one mistake and they get hounded. If a striker makes an absolute sitter but scores one 2 minutes later, everyone forgets the sitter. Sheaf's stupid passes are very infrequent now, but he's still getting hammered for them.
It's the nature of them, I think. Yes. That's all it is. It's not so much the mistake anymore because, like you say, Hammer makes mistakes. It's the nature of that mistake which people have got in their mind of what Ben Sheaf will do. The mistake, we know exactly which one it is. It's going to be that brain fart, and it just happens to be that his brain farts are the most inexplicable. So, but everything else is probably at a level which so many other players on the pitch can't achieve.
The other thing with Sheaf
I'd like him
season,
to warm up a bit quicker in games, though. think he can be very slow to get into his rhythm in the game. And at Huddersfield, he made 2 fouls really early on from losing the ball inexplicably. That I find quite a frustration. As he comes into the game, I think, he improves. And I think probably taking him off at Huddersfield was the main disruptor. But I don't know. It'd be nice if he picked it up a bit quicker.
I think the thing is, I think his use of the ball is so important. Talking earlier, what Neil was talking about in terms of what makes the team work, his use and recycling of the ball is far superior to Liam Kelly. And when you don't have Sheaf and you have Kelly, our use of the ball, movement of the ball, and spreading the ball isn't as good, and it's not as quick, and it's not as accurate. And for me, Kelly's passing this season has been a bit of a bugbear of mine because he often passes behind players, and it's just like, oh, come on, Liam! Like, you've played 125 games now. We know you're a decent player. Can you stop killing moves by playing that pass behind someone? Where Sheaf, I think, there are still aspects of his game which are not quite perfect, but in terms of how he has developed since he's been here and the parts of his game which have improved, he really has sort of developed in a lovely way. And all power to him, because I think we were all a bit questioning whether or not we could sign him, and I think we've all been very impressed with him.
Yeah, I think the thing for me in the last few weeks is physically, I just feel like he's sort of stamped his authority much more. I feel like we for years, me and Paul have talked about character in midfield, and I think that last season, even more than the mistakes, was that there was an absence of character and control in the midfield, and I just think in recent weeks that seemed much more apparent, especially for someone who is quite a big guy. He's not, he's got something to put about. Is that increasingly you feel like he's really letting people know he's there. Anyone else or anything else that hasn't been touched upon in the course of the last hour that we want to do before we wrap up?
Can someone just bring me up to speed on what's going on with Hammer? Is he okay?
My understanding is that he had got a little bit of an injury, and then Robbins had risked him, and then in doing so, that injury has flared up slightly worse than it needed to be.
Football fans are very strange, aren't they? Because I saw him get absolute pelters against West Brom. Oh, people aren't slagging off O'Hare, and he was awful. And it's like, not O'Hare, Hamer, got O'Hare on the brain, going, Hamer was awful. And it's like, he went off after 25 minutes because he was clearly not fit. Like, there's no, he wasn't terrible because he was having you could see. I don't know if anyone else watched this, but I think it was after about the 15th minute or something, he did a really bad pass. And you could sort of see with him, he was just like remonstrating with himself on the pitch, like really angry with himself about how rotten he was playing. And it wasn't one of those ones where he doesn't need anyone else telling him that he's having a shit game. He's old enough and good enough to know when he's clearly not at the races. And you could see him physically on the pitch, just struggling with how his body wasn't doing what he was trying to do. And it was, simple passes he wasn't completing. You're like, that's clearly, there's something wrong with him, because it wasn't that long after the Birmingham game, the first 45 minutes against Birmingham, you were like, when he's on his top form, he is better than the Championship.
Yeah,
I miss him already.
I think he is the one where you think, if someone came in if a Premier League club came in for him, not only can you see it, you'd be like, actually, probably it's going to happen for you at some point. The other one I always thought that about was Dabo, but I'm less convinced at the moment with Dabo. As much as I love the guy,
I just don't think you can underestimate how much of a step up it is for the Premier League. And like I say, Jefferson Lerma is a really good example of it. That's a player that shouldn't be in the Championship, presumably only be in the Championship now because Bournemouth is paying Premier League wages, and probably he couldn't leave to go back to Europe and get better than that. I think, I'm not sure Harmer is dyed in the wool guaranteed Premier League class. I think he's very, 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 very good for the Championship. I just don't know whether he's like an immediate fit for someone like Brighton or someone like that. Do you know what I mean?
But I think the thing is and this is sort of go full to the O'Hare. The reason I don't see anyone buying O'Hare is I don't see anyone looking at his output, and I don't know who would buy him. I think that's my issue with O'Hare from the Premier League, because someone like Burnley wouldn't touch him because they need someone who's proven goals, proven results.
Ironically, Burnley are probably the ideal team.
But the thing is that they aren't, are they? Because they're struggling at the moment for goals.
Well, they don't play with the number 10. But what I'm saying is that he's kind of
work ethic.
Yeah. If you're Sean Dyche and someone's told you've got to buy a number 10, you'd be like, right, I'll buy the most pragmatic number 10 that I can possibly buy.
The thing with Hamer is I can see someone looking at him and going, he would be worth the gamble of what we could probably do something with him. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes it's what else can I say, sort of whether or not he's first team at the moment, but he would bring something he'd bring an option, or at least he would probably, again, someone like Burnley, he'd probably be okay. But it's always about who's going to buy these players, isn't it? And that's maybe there isn't anyone out there, but apparently Gerrard was at the Birmingham game.
Yeah, I think it was just. I think when you dig into that, is that it was just the fact that they were local, and I think and
we were playing.
Basically, yeah. Gerrard was genuinely interested in Hamer, apparently, because we played Rangers in a pre-season friendly 2 years ago, didn't we? And he played really, really well, and he was interested in taking him to Rangers. That, I believe, is canon. But the idea that Gerrard was looking at us, I think what had happened is that Gary McAllister is number 2. And so I think that they had sort of gone as a mixture of kind of business and pleasure.
Fair enough. I just think that first 45 minutes at Birmingham, you were just watching someone, you're like, we haven't seen anyone play like that for Cov for a long, long time. He was superb. And I think he still, for me, is the diamond in that team. He's the one player you watch. But look, I mean, very much the same with Aaron Gunnarsson, where you were like, he's just when he's playing on form, he's got something which drags your eye to him. He's got a very classic way of playing, hasn't he?
Right. Anything else before we wrap up? That sounds like no. So, Paul, thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Imogen, thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Neil, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back, whenever, I suppose. Bye.